Morning, everybody. Welcome to the last day of Solar Week. If this is your first time joining us, I'm John Paul DeVersa, the Senior Energy Planner with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. We do ask that you keep yourselves muted and your cameras turned off to conserve bandwidth. And please use the chat feature to submit any questions. If we're unable to get to them during the presentation, we'll be sure to cover them during the Q&A at the end. So we have a full house today here at the DeVersa household, and I apologize for any random basement noises that you may hear. I will also do my best to keep myself muted as well. And what a week it's been. We've covered utility scale solar, why local governments should be involved, how local governments can be involved, economic development, and community perspectives. Yesterday, we discussed another type of solar development that has been gaining interest in Ohio. That's community solar. From a regulatory perspective, it's not quite ready for prime time, but we expect your communities to continue asking about it. And today, another tool that can drive solar development in Ohio, community choice aggregation. So real quick, before we jump into that, if you have questions about residential solar or solar on your facilities or any other additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me or check our website for additional resources that we have available. And so for today, we want you to leave Solar Week understanding what aggregation is all about and how it's being used in the region to achieve some pretty ambitious goals. With us today, we have Aaron Beck, Director of Special Projects for the City of Columbus, and Zach McGuire, who's been driving the activities of Smart Columbus Energy with the Columbus Partnership. Aaron and Zach, before I turn it over to you, let's see if I know how to run this poll in Teams. Hang on one sec here. All right, everyone, a poll should be popping up on your screen in just a minute, and if not, you should be able to see it in the chat as well. Answer it to the best of your ability, and we're just kind of taking a temperature right now to see where you may be at regarding aggregation. And it's just one question. All right, we'll give everyone just a couple more minutes.
Couple more minutes, what the fuck are you doing?
John Paul, this is Glenn. I'm not seeing the poll. I don't know whether anyone else is, but I'm not seeing it.
Okay. So some people are seeing it. Glenn, do you know if it's in your chat?
Doesn't appear to be. I just did my first polling, through forms here a couple days ago in one of my presentations, and I know it can show up either spot, but I'm not seeing it. It's okay.
Okay.
I did check the third box regardless of what it said, so we're good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yes, for anyone else whom it might not be showing up for, don't worry about it. And this is my first time doing it, so I'm learning a little bit of trial by fire here. All right, why don't we jump into see the results. All right, and it looks like 60% of people live in a community where community aggregation has passed. Almost 20% are unsure, and about 23% have not considered it yet. So that's pretty cool, especially that at least no one here responded that they tried to pass it and it didn't work. So interesting stuff. Aaron, over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much, Jean Paul. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. Can everyone see that all right? I'll take silence as a yes. So,
Looks good, Aaron.
okay, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, John Paul and Morpsey, for the opportunity to be here today. Again, my name's Erin Beck. I am a Director of Special Projects in Mayor Ginther's office with the City of Columbus, and I am our Sustainable Columbus liaison, and so have been working very closely on our Clean Energy Aggregation Initiative. So this initiative really got started in earnest at the city's 2020 State of the City address, when Mayor Ginther made bold commitments around sustainability as part of his equity agenda. So those commitments included a long-term goal to really committing the City of Columbus to become carbon neutral by 2050. And then, of course, the other big goal that was made and commitment that was made was a commitment to pursuing community choice aggregation, an electric community choice aggregation that was 100% clean energy powered by 2022. And so before I really speak to the what and how, I really wanted to start with why. So why clean energy? You know, why does this matter? Certainly, as I mentioned, the city has clear goals around emissions reductions in order for Columbus to do its part to mitigate global climate change. But another really motivating factor and big reason was, and one that we found that really resonates with the community, is in fact that clean energy supports public health. So, you know, we know it supports public health and ensuring a healthy environment for residents. So with the city's aggregation, we are looking at 700 megawatts of clean energy displacing fossil fuel generations, which this really has huge impacts for public health for our local and state community. So as you can see here with some of the figures, they're pretty impactful, particularly the estimated $210 million of avoided healthcare costs over the next 20 years. Not to mention as well the thousands of fewer missed school days and work days that the switch to clean energy can avoid. So pretty impactful statistics here. I know you can read those there. Another big benefit too is that these are benefits for everyone, regardless of whether or not a resident is participating in the aggregation program. And so now that we've kind of talked a little bit about the why on clean energy, I did just want to do a quick refresh on just what community choice aggregation is. It can also be referred to as just aggregation or governmental aggregation. Just wanted to throw out there that you might hear some of those terms used interchangeably, but it's really referring to the same thing. And I know this audience probably has a lot of knowledge and may understand what aggregation is already. Saw some of those great results in the poll that it sounds like a lot of folks, you know, may have this already in their community, which is great. But I still wanted to go over a little bit of the basics, just in case we have folks on who this might be a new topic for. So there really are three main components to energy and what makes up an energy bill. And those components are generation, transmission, and distribution, which you can kind of see here on the graphic. And so aggregation really is a process through which the city can pool its residents and small businesses together to contract for energy on the generation portion. So by using group buying power, the city can provide competitive rates and provide more control over the energy source. So the utility, that transmission and distribution, or what's called the grid, that always stays the same, which means residents will continue to get the same service and the same bill that they receive from AEP, just as they always have. And that's really what this graphic is just trying to show here. So through aggregation, you know, we can pool everybody together kind of as the end user and really make that switch from traditional sources over to clean renewable energy like wind and solar. And another important item to note is that the city is pursuing what's called an opt-out aggregation. And that means that residents who are eligible to be in the program are automatically enrolled into the program unless they choose to opt out. And one of the main reasons for pursuing an opt-out program is that they really have a much higher participation rate, which means a more impactful program in regards to clean energy and to the support it can give to the community. So we talked a little bit about why clean energy matters, but there really are, and a little bit of the aggregation 101, just to make sure everyone understands what it is we're talking about, but there really are many benefits of a clean energy aggregation that makes it a win-win-win for the city and for our residents. So as we've kind of talked about, it really enables a rapid shift to clean renewable energy. We can very quickly make that transition. So that's definitely a huge benefit of an aggregation program and committing to being 100% renewable. It can spur the local economy and workforce development. So by making the switch to solar and making sure that it's Ohio-based solar, which is something also, I guess I should have mentioned that before, that's been very important to the city as well, is that we're looking at solar assets that are based right here in Ohio. And so, you know, those are assets that are going to have to be built. Those are jobs. That's opportunity for training, for apprenticeships, you know, for building up a local and diverse pipeline to really get our residents ready for these jobs of the future. Again, it can give consumers competitive electricity prices. So, you know, the city is there to really negotiate with the supplier on their behalf and make sure that we're getting good pricing for our residents. And it expands and leverages consumer. So this is another option for our residents when it comes to energy and their energy supply. So, you know, through a city or municipal aggregation program, you're adding a third option. Basically, residents can either go out and shop on their own, they can participate in their city aggregation program, or they could just stick with, you know, the state regulated price to compare. And one thing I did want to mention, it's not really shown on this graphic here at all, but another benefit and option that cities have with aggregation is incorporating a community grant fee into the energy rate. And so that grant fee then flows back to the city to be used at their discretion. And so the city of Columbus is certainly planning to incorporate a grant fee into that rate, and that will be used to actually support our sustainability and climate priorities. So like I mentioned at the beginning, we've got big ambitious goals to become carbon neutral by 2050. Really, you know, this is going to be a great opportunity for us to be able to keep investing toward meeting that goal. So that's another big opportunity that comes around with aggregation. And then I just wanted to give a little bit of context for kind of how big of a deal this is for Columbus and for Ohio. So our aggregation program is actually going to be one of the largest aggregations in the country. And so what this graphic is just showing you, these bubbles are representative of some of the other cities that are also participating in the climate challenge, just like Columbus is, and kind of what they're seeing in terms of scale with some of their PPAs that they're pursuing. So if you actually kind of add up all of those cities and what they're doing all together, that basically equals what Columbus and Ohio is going to see through our 700 megawatts of solar and wind that's going to be installed right here in Ohio. So that's pretty exciting. And then I did simplify this down a bit, but did of course want to talk about the process that the city has gone through. Simplified it mostly for the sake of time, and so we have lots of time for questions and may get into this a little bit more then. But basically all of these bubbles or kind of and arrows are representing what took place in 2020. So we made the commitment at State of the City in February to pursue the 100% aggregation program. Shortly after that, the city did do an RFP to bring on an energy consultant to really help us with all aspects of implementing and starting the aggregation program. The city then did an RFSQ to select a preferred supplier. So a supplier who we knew was going to be able to help us meet our ambitious goal for clean energy, you know, be able to provide Ohio-based clean energy and really be a creative partner as we look toward implementing this program. And so then, of course, another big component was election day. Residents did and voters did approve issue 1, which then really allowed the city to move forward with implementation of the program. And I did kind of want to point out just throughout this process, I've kind of looked at this because we were pursuing an opt-out, that does mean that you have to go to the ballot. And so really kind of looked at this whole process as being broken into two main components. There's sort of everything that has to happen before Election Day and before you go to the ballot, and then everything that happens after you get that approval from voters and from residents. And that's really when you get to start to focus more on implementation. So once we had that authority from voters to move forward, we were able to apply to the PUCO to become a certified government aggregator. And that kind of brings us to where we are now. The city is still in negotiations with AEP Energy on that final supply contract, and is planning to have the program start in June of this year, which actually puts us 6 months ahead of our 2022 goal. So that's really great. And then I did just want to point out, in case folks want to get more into the weeds of this, we actually do have a very detailed timeline of our process. If you go to cleanenergycolumbus.org/process, there's actually, you can find links to all of the documents we've used, the legislation, all of the recordings of the public hearings, press conferences, kind of anything you could imagine that we've done so far with aggregation. So just wanted to make sure folks know that resource is there. And then that kind of brings me to lessons learned, what we've learned so far. We're still in the process of getting this program up and running and implemented, but did just want to share some lessons that I think are really important. Certainly transparency and resident education. I think these kind of go hand in hand, which is why I put them together. But, you know, being as transparent as possible about what the process is, what aggregation is, I think is just really critical, because it's such a complex process and energy is just so complex that we want to make sure that residents and the public know that everything is above board, that they have access to, you know, everything that they can. And that is just a really critical piece, because there will be a lot of questions about, you know, just what is this program? How is it working? And that's kind of why I put that along with resident education. That is something I recommend starting as soon as possible. There's just big hurdles for a lot of residents. Most people don't really understand how energy works, frankly. So there's just a lot of resident education that has to happen if you're going to pursue an aggregation program and want it to be 100% clean energy. You know, you have to explain to residents what does aggregation mean, and then what the benefits are of clean energy and kind of why that matters. So, and we saw this, that another thing I wanted to share on that front, you know, we saw that very much as we were pursuing this on the ballot. You know, we saw huge swings in support with just a little bit of information. For example, when we held focus groups, you know, if it was a group of 10 people, if all they were doing was reading the ballot language, you had maybe 2 people that were supportive. But after just a little bit of education and kind of understanding, explanation of what aggregation is, you know, that swung to 7, 8 people being supportive. So that education piece is very, very important. And that is as well. So the city actually has an advisory group, an aggregation advisory group. I definitely think, you know, if we were to have done this all again, that we would have started that a little bit sooner. We started that group in the fall. So I think, you know, as soon as you can start incorporating stakeholders, resident feedback into the process, it really helps with the transparency component. It helps with education. Then those folks can really help educate their networks in the community. So that's just kind of a lesson learned as well that I wanted to share. And along those lines, incorporating clean energy into the ballot language. So aggregation is actually pretty common in Ohio, and many communities have aggregation. It's not always committed, though, to being 100% clean energy. So if that's something that's really important to you and your community, I definitely recommend incorporating some of that clean energy language into your ballot language. So there's actually sample language that just comes from, you know, the Secretary of State's office, but it's very wonky, doesn't really explain at all what, you know, aggregation is. And frankly, it just gives you kind of more political backing as well later on down the road that might exist past, you know, your elected tenure. It just really makes sure that that program always stays committed to clean energy. So that's something that I do recommend. And then utilizing assistance and expertise. This is something that has been really helpful to the city to have an aggregation consultant who is really helping us through all aspects and steps of this process. Now, that's not to say that every community has to use a consultant per se, but just definitely seek out help or expertise in this space because, like I've said, energy is so complex. There is just, you know, a lot of nuances to the work. And frankly, even with all of the staff and, you know, city attorneys and everything that the city has at our disposal, we still found it really helpful to have, you know, attorneys who work in energy on a regular basis, reviewing all of the documents, kind of helping us with that supplier negotiations and kind of being able to give us an independent lens on, you know, everything that's going on. So that's definitely something that I think is, you know, a lesson learned and kind of a benefit that I would recommend to others. So with that, I think I'm going to end this and hand things over to Zach.
Zach, real quick before you get started, Aaron, why don't we take a couple questions since there were some very specific to the Columbus program.
Yeah, that's great.
One thing that's always on people's minds, that community grant fee that you mentioned. Does Columbus know the dollar value of that, and will that be publicized to residents?
Yep. Yeah, so we have estimates right now of what we believe it's going to be. So we know that the community grant fee is going to be $1 million. And that's outlined in the MOU that we executed with AEP Energy, which again is available on that website for download. So that is public. We have not been hiding that by any means. And based on the estimates, I say it's an estimate because it's based on the number of participants in the program, and then it's dependent on how much energy they're using every year. But our estimates are anywhere from $1.5 million to $2 million per year.
Great, thank you. Another great question. We got quite in true Solar Week fashion. There's fantastic questions coming in already. So we'll take one or two more and then we'll save the rest for the end. Okay. But one that I think is really good. How did Columbus choose its energy consultant?
Yeah, so we did, like I said, shortly after State of the City and that we announced we would be pursuing this, we did an RFP. So we did a competitive bid process and we received, 5 responses to that RFP. And that is how we selected our energy consultant. We had a team that kind of reviewed all of the responses. This is pretty typical of how the city does a lot of their bids. Had a team that reviewed all of the responses and kind of scored everyone, and that's how we selected our supplier. Or I'm sorry. Well, that's how we selected the supplier as well, but that's how we selected the energy consultant.
Awesome, thank you very much. There's a bunch of other questions that they might take a little bit to answer, so we'll definitely get to those at the end. Zach, are you set to go?
Yeah, thanks, JP. Can you hear me?
Hear you just fine.
Wonderful. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. JP, just to confirm, you guys are able to see the blue solar screen here?
Yeah, it looks great, Zach.
All right, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you, John Paul, and the MORPC team first and foremost. This has been an incredible week with such an amazing gathering of stakeholders across the region and even beyond. And I want to thank Aaron Beck and the City of Columbus and give a huge shout out and kudos to their team. 700 megawatts of new renewable energy in the state of Ohio is a Herculean feat. As a Columbus resident, I was telling Aaron this morning, it's probably the proudest moment I've had as a voter, being able to check that box on aggregation. So wanted to give a huge shout out to Aaron and the team at the city and John Paul and the MORPC team for putting this together this week. It's been really incredible. I'm excited to kick things off on what we've been working on. So My name, for those that don't know me, is Zach McGuire. I'm the Director of Clean Energy Solutions at the Columbus Partnership. And I lead our clean energy initiative through Smart Columbus, called Smart Columbus Energy. For those that may not know the partnership or Smart Columbus, the partnership is a CEO member organization. Our CEO is Alex Fisher. It's made up of about 70 plus CEOs that are the largest employers in the region. We represent about 30% of the workforce in the Central Ohio region through the partnership. The Smart Columbus initiative is a initiative, joint public-private partnership between the city of Columbus that was established when the city of Columbus won the Smart Cities Challenge in 2016. And also with that victory, we also won $10 million for electrification and decarbonization from the Paul Gion Family Philanthropies organization. And through that initiative, for the past few years, we've been working on decarbonization through electrification. So we're working really strongly on electric vehicle adoption, which is probably, for those that know Smart Columbus, know that that's what we're working on, along with new mobility pilots and initiatives leveraging data and technology. But for our part at the partnership, our employees, including myself, worked hand in hand with the City of Columbus staff on executing the goals of that grant. The electrification grant, which is the smaller of the two, actually came to a close in March of last year. And before the grant came to a close, we began exploring new opportunities to expand and amplify the impact of our work in decarbonization through electrification. One of the natural progressions we found through engaging our private sector membership at the partnership and other members in the community was to move toward clean energy. There hadn't been a strong private sector initiative that was working on clean energy adoption that we found in Central Ohio, and many of our companies, organizations encouraged us to dive in. And what we did over the course of about 6 months was did a lot of market research, established a team, and established a task force that was put together specifically to create a new initiative that was specifically oriented to help private sector organizations in Central Ohio transition to clean energy. Through that engagement and through that dialogue with our members and other local stakeholders and experts, we actually came across a model called aggregation, which, as many of us have been talking about today, and as Aaron laid out, is a very popular model these days. However, there's a couple different types of aggregation. Ours is specifically oriented toward the private sector, where Aaron and the City of Columbus are working on government aggregation. Our setup is a little bit different, but it was a model that came out of this direct and candid dialogue with our members on how we should approach clean energy. And this model was established as our go-to pathway to help our members like Huntington Bank, Cardinal Health, American Electric Power, and others that make up our membership to accelerate to clean energy. So as you can see here, there's a lot that this aggregation, this private sector aggregation model is able to do. And you will find that there are a lot of similarities in terms of the benefits to private sector aggregation comparatively to government aggregation, which is, again, what Aaron just went through. This makes clean energy cost competitive. It makes it much more simple to implement. Private sector aggregation in our model generates new wind and solar projects in Ohio, and those are the projects that supply power to our customers. And it's really designed to fulfill environmental, social, and governance goals that many publicly traded companies are being pushed to adopt by global investors. If any of you follow BlackRock, which is one of the largest institutional investors in the world, their CEO recently came out and said that every publicly traded company really needs to have a pathway to a zero carbon future for them to seriously consider investing in. So I tell you all this as context to why we determined that private sector electrical aggregation was the right model to help the private sector here in Central Ohio transition to clean energy. How this works is actually in a lot of ways, again, similar to how government aggregation works. But our role as Smart Columbus and as a facilitator of large private sector organizations who we work with day in, day out, was to take large new solar and wind projects. I know today's topic is on solar, but wind is part of the equation for us as well, as it is for the city of Columbus. But large wind and solar projects in the state of Ohio, and being able to bundle those together and provide low-cost, simple, clean power for our membership. If you see the visual here on the right, we're taking these two icons are wind and solar. We're able to bring those together in a fashion, in a retail energy supply contract fashion. May again sound familiar, and then be able to provide that to our members. What that scale does with using wind and solar, having that diverse mix of resources, is it does actually reduce the cost of the power purchase agreement that ultimately our members are going into, or our customers are signing. As Aaron mentioned, this is 100% clean, and the term we like to use is dark green, meaning there is additionality involved, meaning these projects would not be coming online were it not for these long-term contracts being signed by these companies. That's a really important term, especially in the private sector, because that really validates that you are truly buying clean energy. You can, of course, buy renewable energy certificates, but in the private sector, there is certainly a higher standard set above RECs. A lot of this standard is being set by the tech giants of the world, Google, Facebook, Apple, but it is very much permeating into standardized sort of ESG goals across publicly traded companies and even non-publicly traded companies. And that is this notion of additionality. Regionality and buying local is also becoming significantly more important to private sector organizations, driving real impact locally. That was of critical importance to our members when we originally engaged them on this topic. You saw them at the first slide. That was Cardinal Health, Huntington, Cover My Meds, and other members agreed that we want to be buying and investing in projects that are going to be adding economic opportunity, new tax revenue to Ohio communities, rather than, say, a wind farm in Texas or Oklahoma. And these really are cost competitive. We're seeing rates right at the same price for very cheap brown power that most organizations purchase today. For a little context for those who aren't energy wonks, we are currently as a country at 20-year historic lows in terms of electricity pricing. We're currently coming off that bottom a little bit. So it's actually a great time to look into a renewable energy power purchase agreement, because that is going to hedge at an incredibly low rate when prices are likely to rise in terms of brown power. So overall, this program is very impactful and hits or checks all the boxes for our private sector organizations, many of which likely have operations in your municipalities in Central Ohio and beyond. So community value, a question in a comment that Aaron made, or rather a comment Aaron made about the community grant, and a question around community grant is, how are we creating added value to the community beyond just the renewable energy purchase? Of course, that's being funded through the community grants for the city of Columbus. With our private sector aggregation, it's very similar, actually. We take effectively a similar sort of rider on the power purchase agreement to fund different initiatives here in Central Ohio that are sustainability and equity related, also around innovation and making sure that Central Ohio is leading on climate, but also becoming a more prosperous region. Different initiatives that, this private sector aggregation funds are clean energy initiatives like Smart Columbus Energy Electrified Mobility, which of course involves improving the air, creates new economic investment, as Gilbert Michelle and others have laid out this entire week, and creates, of course, new tax revenue for local municipalities in Central Ohio. It's really a way, this private sector aggregation is a way to lift all ships, if you will, because we're not only having an impact on the environment, and of course that is the primary reason why many organizations are doing this, but also we're able to drive new economic investment into the state and provide cities and municipalities like your own, who may be hosting some of these solar and wind systems, with critical new tax revenue. This is a time in well, I shouldn't say post, we are still in a global pandemic, which means that cities and municipalities across the country and the world really do need a new source of tax revenue to continue to operate their government agencies and their municipalities. So there is huge local benefit that is being driven by private sector aggregation. Another outcome of this work, and this crosses both between government and private sector aggregation, is the attention. National media, and in fact even international media, we found, are really looking at Central Ohio as a leader on climate. And I think we all know the landscape from a state energy policy perspective is difficult in some cases for us, but we are putting a real light on Central Ohio. And again, kudos to the city of Columbus and Aaron's team, but also cities like Grove City, who passed community choice aggregation specifically to transition to clean energy. This really shows leadership, and national attention is received when you make shifts and changes like this from an aggregation standpoint. I mentioned impact. This is a highly impactful program, and I want to double down actually on the environmental impact that we're having here. Through our renewable energy aggregation program alone, which has enrolled 3 customers since launching in August of last year, those customers being Cardinal Health, Huntington, and AP. We, through these purchases, are going to be driving the adoption of over, it's a pretty big number, 761 million kilowatt hours over the 12-year term of clean renewable energy in the state of Ohio. That totals to over 500 million rather, with a B, 538 approximately metric tons of CO2 equivalent. That is a massive number. That is the equivalent of reducing or taking away over 5 million gallons of gasoline. It's the equivalent of planting 741,000 10-year-old trees. And it's similar to powering over 5,000 homes. And we're really excited because this is just the start of private sector aggregation here in Central Ohio. And at the end of the day, this is a very Columbus initiative. There is no other localized private sector coordinated aggregation program for clean energy like this across the country. There are private sector aggregations where some of the large tech companies have grouped together to buy energy from large wind and solar resources, but never in such a localized, coordinated fashion. So we're really proud of that. And we feel like that is really the Columbus way in action. This idea that together we can do more. And I want to thank our members and our customers who've enrolled in this program so far. I want to shift real quick. Aaron and I are actually going to tackle the last portion of this presentation together, but I want to circle back to government aggregation, which is what Aaron walked through and what the city of Columbus is doing. This community choice aggregation, government aggregation, we have found really is the most efficient way to shift the region toward a clean energy future. Aaron laid out the basics earlier. You know, we're taking energy supply from new wind and solar resources, delivering it to the aggregated community through the utility. And the surprising thing here is it's not a new concept. What is new is we are using this lever, or this mechanism rather, to specifically transition to clean energy and add incredible amount of benefit to our communities. Aggregation started in Ohio in 2000 up in Toledo. Well over 400 communities have aggregated in Ohio, so this isn't new. It's very common. The reason we mention that is if you're a community in Central Ohio that is not aggregated, you know, this is a tried and true model. And cities like Columbus and Grove City and others are really leading and spearheading the effort to using that lever toward clean energy procurement. Now, not everyone can participate. You know, this is why we have the private sector aggregation, is because only entities that have an electricity load under 700,000 kilowatt hours annually can participate in the city of Columbus and other programs across the state. Most of our members, private sector members, use far more electricity on an annual basis, in some cases hundreds of thousands of megawatt hours. So it's a critical piece of the puzzle to have the private sector engaged. And in Central Ohio, we're leading that effort with our members in other large private sector entities in Central Ohio. So again, this is a pretty common model. There are different types of aggregation. And at the end of the day, why communities aggregate, you know, it's a better rate. In this case, it is the best way to get low cost clean energy. You have renewable and non-tax-based revenue. So you're also creating new tax-based revenue through new projects that we've heard from earlier in the week. But to give you a quick recap of the Columbus impact from an economic standpoint, I'll kick it over to Aaron to run through this slide.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. And thanks for all of the background and kind of recapping for everybody, you know, on what aggregation is and kind of where it comes from and just a little more about the practice. So I talked a little bit about the 700 megawatts that are going to be powering the Columbus aggregation. And so just kind of wanted to share a little bit more on what that means in terms of workforce impact. I talked about that a little bit earlier as a benefit, but wanted to put some more real numbers on this for everyone to give a little bit of understanding about what the opportunity is here. So kind of have a great visual here of what AEP Energy's portfolio is going to look like and what could be powering the Ohio aggregation, or will be powering the Ohio aggregation when we get into, like Zach said, that dark green energy that is coming from assets right here in Ohio. And really this is looking at inducing over 4,000 jobs, almost 4,500 jobs ultimately in the state of Ohio. And so most of those are going to be in the construction phase of these assets, but also long-term permanent jobs, over 200 jobs to really maintain those facilities. So that's a great opportunity there in terms of workforce development. And like I was saying earlier, you can see that some of these assets are going to be closer to the Central Ohio area. So how can we, you know, work with our supplier, work with the developers and folks that are going to be building these sites to, you know, create more apprenticeship opportunities, training opportunities. You know, how can we get our residents here in Columbus, you know, exposed to these jobs and really diversify and prepare them for these jobs and these opportunities. And then I'm going to hand it back over to Zach, who's going to kind of talk about how this can be scaled up and what the potential really is in Ohio.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. A huge potential and for a regional opportunity. We've heard from folks like Gilbert Michau from Ohio University, who this screen here, or this slide here, actually pulls directly from his data. And if we use his model here, we can actually see what the aggregate opportunity is from an economic standpoint. You know, if more municipalities in the region were to aggregate for specifically Ohio-based clean energy in a similar fashion to what Columbus has done. In Gilbert's study, he looked at 3 scenarios: 2.5 gigawatts being the low scenario, 5 gigawatts of new solar, and 7.5 gigawatts of new solar. Now that's for the entire state, and I won't review sort of the details around that, but that is for the entire state, I repeat. Why I bring this up is, if we look at the numbers of how many residents are in Central Ohio, which is about 2.5 million or so, and we take in consideration how much renewable energy capacity the city of Columbus alone is adding to the grid, which is 700 megawatts. If we take sort of a rough estimation, and Gilbert may be a big asterisk here, so to speak, but you know, if we multiply that and compare it to what the total population of the region is, we about alone here in Central Ohio hit that low deployment scenario of 2.5 gigawatts. So a really good, I think, reference point, albeit Gilbert may challenge me on how accurate it is to look at this low point from a statewide perspective, because it about is equivalent to what the Central Ohio region in total, in aggregate, would be able to procure in reference to clean energy capacity. So what you're seeing here again is 18,000 potentially new induced jobs in the construction phase, over 200 new jobs permanently, massive economic impacts, you know, 3.2 billion total economic impacts. And this is really the opportunity. Just a massive scale up in the region toward clean energy, leveraging aggregation really could spell a large economic opportunity for our region moving forward. So that's a little tease. Aaron, I will kick it over to you to sort of tee up sort of the final note we want to make here today with the presentation.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Zach. So yes, regional potential, that is something, I don't think it will come as a surprise to anyone here that Mayor Ginther is all about regional collaboration and how can we work together to really amplify our impact. And so aggregation is no different. Very early on when we made this commitment, the mayor was asking the question of, you know, how can we scale this up to have, as a region, to have greater impact for our community, both around, you know, our larger sustainability and climate goals, and just to help further, I think, the impact when it comes to all of those workforce opportunities that we were just talking about. You know, how can we make sure that we're getting to that aggressive scenario that Gilbert is forecasting? It could be possible for Ohio. So how can we work together as a region to help make sure that that's happening? And so that's really the opportunity that we have. Want to make sure we are here. We want to talk to other communities in Central Ohio about aggregation. We're here to be a resource. Would love to talk to your communities about this potential, if it's something that's of interest to you. And actually, before I go too far down that, I think I'm going to hand it back over to Zach, maybe to talk a little bit about just what the potential impacts could be if we were to approach this as a region and just have an even larger scale.
Yeah, Aaron, and you just heard me walk through sort of the economic opportunity through a regional approach to aggregation for clean energy procurement. You also get to see that this is a massive health opportunity as well. We're talking about the potential to reduce 45 or more premature deaths, 1,600 fewer cases of breathing illness, to 16,000, fewer days missed of school for kids, and well over 2,000 fewer work days missed for adults who may have breathing illness caused by lack of high quality air. And that gets us to the environmental imperative. That is, we're talking 56 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. That is a massive number. Again, to put that into perspective, we're talking 46 million trees, which is a massive carbon sequester, or the equivalent of taking out 600,000 gas-powered cars in the region as well. There's just a huge opportunity to really improve the prosperity of the region through leveraging the mechanism of aggregation, both on the government side, like Aaron and the City of Columbus are doing, and the private sector side, what we're doing at Smart Columbus. And it is not just an environmental imperative. It is also an economic, health and equity imperative. So appreciate the time today. That's it. And I will echo Aaron's sentiment. If you have questions and follow up to our session today, please reach out to either of us. We'd love to speak with you.
All right. Thank you guys both so much. This is huge. This is an amazing undertaking by both the City of Columbus and Smart Columbus. I wanted to drive home a point that I thought was really good. Aaron, you brought this up, and Zach, you reiterated it. But the benefits of these programs are really shared by everyone, not just participants in the program. And I think that's a great point for local governments who might be interested in this, in that, we build roads even if you don't own a car. We seek economic development even if you already have a job. We know that there are things that we can do that benefit everybody, and especially everyone over the long term. And so we have a ton of examples of where we pursue projects that are not necessarily for only the participants. And I thought that was wonderful. So thank you for raising it. Excuse me. I'm gonna scroll up in the comments to make sure we address some of those ones that came up first. Zach, to throw it out to you real quick while I'm doing that, what do local governments have to do to support private sector aggregation? Is there anything that they need to do to assist companies in their communities that might be looking into aggregating their energy consumption?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we'll throw sort of the simple answer out first, which is reach out to me, reach out to us at Smart Columbus. We work across the Central Ohio region with private sector organizations on clean energy procurement. However, I think a conversation with your municipality really is a great starting point to establish a relationship with our team. And then we can provide you with materials, information on the work that we're doing and the benefits of private sector aggregation and clean energy procurement in general for companies. That would be a really good starting point. We do have materials, a website that we can point you to, but we are here to help the private sector organizations that are in your municipalities. But to really drive adoption, it'd be great to connect with the government agency and your team, so we can sort of formulate that plan and create a strategy to engage your private sector members and give you the information, education, and collateral that will be helpful for them to understand what their options are.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Aaron, this is primarily to you, and this you touched on a little bit. Matt Huffman from Clinton Township. It sounds like that they pursued an opt-in, or yes, excuse me, an opt-in program, and which is different than an opt-out program, which the City of Columbus did. Do you know offhand for an opt-in program is going to the voters essential in that case, or only for opt-out?
So I believe it's only if you are implementing an opt-out, because with an opt-in program, a resident would have to, just like it sounds, they would have to opt into the program. So they would kind of be reaching out to you to get enrolled into the program. Whereas with the opt-out, they kind of are automatically enrolled, and there is a process. So before the program will even begin, opt-out letters have to go out. So every resident has to be, if they're an eligible customer for the program, they do get informed, they will get a letter that really explains what the aggregation program is, what the pricing is going to be, and so they are fully informed kind of what is going on and that planned switch. So.
Great. And so kind of along the same lines, is Columbus's program so large because residents are being automatically enrolled? Kind of what's the benefit from a participant standpoint of opt-in versus opt-out?
So, well, ours is going to be so large mostly because our population is so large. We're a very large city, and this is only for accounts that are on AEP Ohio, and they serve most of our customers. So, or I'm sorry, our residents. I always call them residents, not customers. Yeah, so that's really why it's going to be so large. So.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered. I feel like you had another part of your question in there about opt-out versus opt-in. So I think I touched on it a little bit. The benefit for an opt-out program, if you're, a government or a city or a municipality, is that you tend to have higher participation rates. So, and that just means you're going to have a stronger program when it comes to, the impact you're able to have for clean energy. If that's one of your goals, is to support clean energy, because you're just going to have a higher demand as part of your aggregation program. And then, of course, you're going to have a larger community grant fee that's kind of coming in because you have more participants. And that's more ability to impact your community in a positive way, reinvest. So.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think that was really good context. So we had another question. Is Columbus expecting an additional cost to the consumer per kilowatt hour? What's the impact to their monthly bill essentially for this?
So our goal is to beat the price to compare, or be very competitive with the price to compare. And so that's kind of getting into the weeds of energy a little bit. But, if you are a resident who is not shopping for energy, you don't have, a different supply contract, you're on what's called the price to compare, which is regulated by the state. And I can't speak too in the weeds of all of what the components are of all of the pricing and everything. That's why we have a really smart team that I work with at the city, along with our consultant. But that is definitely the goal for our aggregation program, is that whatever that rate is that we do finally lock into. And like I said, we're still negotiating with AEP Energy, so we haven't locked in on that final supply contract or the final pricing. Now, there are components that we know, like I said, the community grant fee, the fee that's going to be going to our consultant, all of that is kind of fixed, but there are components of pricing that changes a lot. And so that hasn't quite been, we're still getting there on that. But the goal, we definitely will not be moving forward unless we can get that price, just at or just below what the price to compare is. Does that answer the question?
I think so, and I think it answered a couple other questions that we had following that. This one is Zach and Aaron. Will you be seeking generation partners, or have those already been selected?
Aaron, why don't you take that from the city's perspective, and then I'll follow up with ours.
Sure. So I think if I'm understanding correctly, so like I said earlier, we did an RFSQ to select an energy supplier, a preferred energy supplier, and that's how we selected AEP Energy. They have what's called their integrated renewable energy product, which is kind of a portfolio of assets that are Ohio-based. And so it's actually not the city that's going to be entering directly with the developers and kind of the assets. That is all going to be done through AEP Energy, if that makes sense. And so one thing I guess I would share, though, is that the city does have a different approach for our own division of power. I was actually just talking to Zach about this morning, because we are not able to include the division of power in the aggregation. So we have to take a different approach with them when it comes to green energy and clean power, which we do have goals for them to, become 100% clean. And so we are looking at on-site solar at the city of Columbus that would then be powering the division of power. So
on the private sector side, we have a more, I would say, flexibility in how ultimately the organization wants to move forward. We have an established aggregation right now, and that's the one that Cardinal, Huntington, and AEP are a part of. That actually leverages the same IRE assets that Aaron just mentioned, actually, that are powering those facilities. However, if a private sector company, organization wanted to buy directly from a solar developer, we could take that route with them as well and sort of advise them and consult along that journey to get them there. However, I will be candid here that, you know, we did a lot of private sector outreach with energy suppliers, solar developers, wind developers, both active here and across the country. And, you know, the solution we ended up using, the integrated renewable energy product, is frankly the lowest cost with the same amount of impact, meaning you're buying directly and facilitating the development of new in-state wind and solar projects through your procurement. So all that being said, there's different routes we can take with a private sector organization depending on their needs, and we can walk them through that journey and that education.
Great, thank you. We had a question, and Zach, you brought this up about electricity prices. Why are you seeing historic low electricity prices? And then why do you think they're going to swing back upwards? And you can feel free to kick this one to me too, because I love this stuff.
Yeah, well, how about this, John Paul? I will answer it, and I will let you maybe correct me where you seem fit. So I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of market research in this space, talking to energy suppliers of all kinds and all shapes or sizes, including engaging some experts on the generation side across portfolio, not just renewable energy, but fossil fuel generation, including natural gas and coal. For those that may not know, natural gas is becoming the primary driver or generator of electricity in Ohio. Coal is becoming just very uneconomic. Many renewable energy projects, some of which are included in the portfolio that both the city and we are working with, are lower cost than coal generation at the moment. But natural gas is sort of the key driver here that we're talking about, because it is the primary generator of electricity here in Ohio. That's a real good benchmark to understand electricity prices. Natural gas is trading at an all-time low, and companies in the natural gas space are actually taking a hit because they've sort of bid to the bottom, if you will, in terms of their procurement price for natural gas to electricity providers and generators. So while we don't have a crystal ball, and prices, frankly, could continue to go down, however, based on the history and the context around the natural gas market, for natural gas companies to stay competitive, and these are natural gas extractors that sell natural gas, you know, the price is likely going to have to increase for them to stay profitable and in business, which is why ultimately we do see electricity prices in Ohio likely going up.
I think you grabbed it pretty well. The only thing that I might add to it is, yeah, new generation that's coming on is all natural gas and renewables, and those are the two cheapest forms right now. At the same time, as older generators get older, just like a car, they get more expensive to keep up and stuff. So, you know, you'll see prices come down and they'll start to go up, and then as demand goes up as well, now that COVID is hopefully going to start moving out over the next year or two, that'll start to impact prices up as well. So I could go on forever, but I'll stop there. Let's see. Zach, question from Mr. Shimmer. How will this program support the legacy work of Smart Columbus going forward in the future, given that the federal grant is over?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, for the question. Smart Columbus is really a continued effort beyond the grant period. However, as you pointed out, and as I mentioned in the presentation, the grant came to a close for the decarbonization electrification grant. And again, there's two that sort of funded the Smart Columbus initiative. One from the US DOT, which actually is still going on. That grant initiative goes through the end of this year. But the electrification decarbonization grant did come to a close last year in March. So part of that slide that I showed on community value and one John Paul just mentioned, the revenue generated, or sort of the rider on the aggregation that exists, actually funds the initiative moving forward. And we're tackling sort of some of the largest issues that we have today in the region, which is sustainability, connectivity, and driving civic and social innovation to create a more prosperous region. And that includes clean energy adoption, being able to continue to drive adoption in the private sector of more clean energy. And we're also doing state advocacy through that. So it's helping us continue to fund the initiative, which provides community value back to the region. And happy to dive into that more offline in terms of the Smart Columbus 2.0 plan.
Awesome. And real quick, back to the prices just for a second, and this is for either of you. Will the price of energy be locked in? And if you could go into a little more detail, such as how long for contracts, relatively speaking, and what are the benefits of long-term contracts if you're seeing that?
Aaron, I'm happy to dive into that. The contracts are flat pricing, so it is a sort of locked-in hedge against future volatility. One of the big reasons our private sector partners and clients like this is it's because it gives them certainty. There's a certain level of value just in having certainty for an organization or a company. There's a certain level of risk that goes into buying on the market, if you will. Each year, you could get hit with maybe a 20 to 30% spike increase. Now, of course, there is the potential, as we talked about earlier, for the price to go down. We don't think the price will go too much farther down based on the economics mentioned, but it is a long-term sort of fixed price program. And our private sector organizations really like that. Again, not only because the price is so low for cost competitive clean energy that is helping them achieve their environmental, social, and governance goals, but because it is providing them that price certainty, which for them honestly lowers their cost of their procurement teams that they have, which ultimately is a big benefit to organizations that typically have teams dedicated just to that.
All right, I think we answered. I'm sorry, Aaron, did you want to jump in?
No, I just was going to say, yeah, Zach did a great job of kind of explaining the pricing and everything. And the city is looking at a little bit of a longer term contract as well. However, I would say it's still much shorter than some of what I've seen in other cities when they're entering into PPAs with assets directly. So sometimes those contracts can be 15, 20 years. So.
Awesome, thanks. So I think we answered some of the other questions about opt-in versus opt-out programs. If you guys want to add any more, feel free to. One question came in. Is there an expectation that renewable energy, as far as prices are concerned, might actually become more competitive than gas?
I'm
Zach,
happy to
kicking
take
that
that. So the short answer is yes, I do think so. If you look at the cost curve of renewable energy over the past 10 years, there has been incredible declines. And I'll look to you, John Paul, to correct me if I am mistaken. But in terms of solar, in the past 10 years, we've seen over 80% cost decline in the cost of solar in the U.S. And similarly, over the past 20 years, because wind at scale, utility scale, has been around a little bit longer, we've seen similar declines. And the innovation doesn't stop. And the solar industry is continuing to innovate. In fact, I think it was just a couple months ago, there was a new solar panel invented that actually had the greatest efficiency. I think it was around 25% efficiency for those. It just means the solar panel is creating more energy with the same amount of space at the same cost. So we continue to innovate. We're going to continue to see price go down with wind as well. We're seeing larger turbines that create more power at the same cost. The only price increase that we'll likely see is the price of potentially transmission and distribution, because with more power on the wires, if you think of transmission and distribution as a sort of a pipe, the more full the pipe gets with power, more congested it gets, and that does increase pricing. But the actual pure energy supply of renewables, wind and solar specifically here, will continue to decline due to the innovation that's occurring in that space.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing as well. There's still some room for the price of solar to drop, particularly around utility scale solar, which is at the moment cost competitive with natural gas as far as producing electricity. All right, so can only Columbus Partnership members participate in the private aggregation program?
That's funny, Rory. I just actually typed an answer in on the chat, but no, any organization that uses more than about 5,000 megawatt hours a year annually can participate in this program. So it's really open. It's a good note for folks that are in municipalities, maybe outskirts of Central Ohio or even beyond. We are not limited to a specific geographic region in Ohio. We could work on with any private sector organization across the state to help them aggregate their load and procure cost-effective wind and solar power. So I think that clears things up. It's not just a partnership program. It's not just a Smart Columbus program. It is for any sort of private sector organization that sort of meets that threshold from an energy procurement standpoint. And that's simply because, economies of scale, you have to use a lot of power to buy a lot of power. So that's why that threshold is there in place.
All right, so I think I got everyone's questions. If anyone feels as though I missed it or you'd like to dig a little deeper into it, please throw it back in the chat and I'll see it pop up, but that list got pretty long there. In the meantime, Aaron and Zach, this regional approach, this will go along with the question that just popped up of where do large institutions like universities and hospitals fit in. This regional approach, thinking about it not only in terms of one city, but how cities can work together, how the region can work together in order to really roll this out to see all of those benefits that you were talking about. What do you think are the next steps? And if you had a magic wand, what would you be wishing for right now?
Aaron, you want to take that first?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. So I think we're certainly trying to gauge which suburban communities and Central Ohio communities are interested in this and are interested specifically in clean energy aggregation. I think that's number one. That's the, kind of the commitment that we would want to be seeing from other communities if we're going to work on this as a region. So I definitely, that's number one, but probably convening a conversation in some kind of way with those communities then to talk about what this could look like, because we certainly don't have a specific answer for that right now. And I think it's really important for us to come together as a region to figure it out together. Certainly don't want it to just be the city of Columbus telling anybody else what to do or anything like that. But that's kind of my vision for how this would move forward. So, and I guess I would add to, just for folks' background and context, we did present about aggregation and kind of floating the regional approach at a Central Ohio Mayors and Managers Association meeting. This was one of the last meetings I had right before COVID hit. So that was back when we could be in person and meet. And there was a lot of enthusiasm for it from the elected officials who were there. So that was really exciting. I think, we just need to make sure we're continuing that conversation and pulling everybody together again.
Yeah, I would echo everything Erin just mentioned, and doubling down on that first point that she made. We are invested in accelerating the clean energy transition here in Central Ohio, and that's what we care about, and that's why we're interested in this mechanism of aggregation, because the economic, environmental, and sort of social benefits that are on the table here are just that massive. And we, as an organization, the Columbus Partnership, One Columbus, Smart Columbus, at the end of the day, our mission is to create a more prosperous region. And if we can address climate change in a substantial fashion through this mechanism, while also creating jobs of the future and jobs that will be here for decades to come. I mean, we're talking about an industry that only serves 5 to maybe 10% of the entire electricity load in the United States. So that's 90% of electricity that still needs to be eventually converted to tackle climate change. And that presents huge job opportunities and job training opportunities for industries that may be disrupted. So that's really the key, though, is clean energy transition presents this great opportunity for us as a region to move or create a more prosperous region. And to address sort of the question around institutions like universities and hospitals, those organizations we would love to engage with and work with. While they may be not nonprofit organizations, they are sort of private sector organizations, and especially those institutions use a lot of electricity. So there are great opportunities to address their carbon footprint through aggregation. So we're working on engaging institutions like that, but would be happy to facilitate any connections or be connected with those types of institutions.
Great, thank you. I think it definitely sounds like this conversation needs to continue, and that Erin, I like your approach of before we really define that conversation, let's get everyone in a room and see what people are thinking. So I think for everyone on the line, I think you'll probably get some follow-up from us on that. Real quick, before I ask you guys for some final thoughts, we got one more question. What about organizations that use less than 5,000 megawatt hours? Are they part of, Erin, your program, or where are they landing?
Yeah, so okay, I'm not great at converting megawatts to kilowatt hours always, but I know it's easy. It's just like dropping one of the zeros. But basically, anyone who uses 700,000 kilowatt hours per year or less can be part of the community choice aggregation program. So that's mostly going to be residential, but it does include some small businesses as well. So,
and to build on that point, Erin, and to I think Rory, who asked the question, while we likely would not pursue aggregation for those entities that say use 1,000 megawatt hours annually, that sort of sit in that medium area or in between, we would certainly want to work with them. We are developing other clean energy solutions that could serve them and their needs, and we continue to provide, advising and education to entities that sit in that portfolio or that area, and we can connect them to solution providers that will be able to help them in a cost-effective way to transition to clean energy. So if there are those that you know of, we're happy to work with them. Aggregation may not be the route we take, but there's other mechanisms and there's other solutions at the table that we can help them out with.
All right, and one last question that I overlooked, but I wanted to make sure that we touched on. So Zach, this one's for you. Large organizations, like Cardinal Health and AEP, why are they aggregating their load? What are they seeing as the benefit? What is that tipping point that makes them say, yes, this is a good idea for us?
Yeah, it's a good question. Really, the value is, I think I had it in my second or third slide, is really being able to provide a few things. Aggregation provides a simple, clean, cost-effective, and impactful way to transition to clean energy. So simple meaning, this is a contract that is similar to how you're buying power already, frankly. It's just a longer term and has a small details change, but it's not a virtual power purchase agreement, which you may have heard of before, where it's a contract for differences. That's a financial transaction, less so much than a utility transaction. So it's important to note, and our organizations provided us feedback before we even kickstarted this program that they wanted a solution that provided a physical deal that was simple, straightforward, and similar to how they already buy energy, which is in that retail package. It's clean, it's 100% wind and solar, which gets toward the cost-effective nature of it. Being able to blend the wind and solar together fits load profiles better. So when you talk about how much energy you use, large companies, if you have an office, it's typically up and down, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. is when you use the power. Solar is a good fit for that. But what about if you have refrigeration or have a 24/7 operation? The wind typically blows at night, so you want to match that cost curve effectively. So wind and solar together fit that really well. And you're driving. I can't underscore or overstate rather enough that the local impact was key. Really being able to get energy from new projects in the state of Ohio, because that's driving new economic investment in our community. That's been critical for most folks. But at the end of the day, price still is king. It has to be price effective, and aggregation, from what we've seen, is the best mechanism to get your lowest cost on 100% clean additional renewable energy.
Great, thanks for that additional context. So we're getting close. We got one more question, so I'll throw it out, and Zach, I'll kind of loop this in with you. So any final thoughts? Again, thank you very much to both of you. Any final thoughts, any next steps that attendees should be thinking about, especially our local governments who are on the line with us today? What should their next step be? And Zach, if you want to touch on where does storage fit into all of this? That's a huge question that I think we could have another whole week on if we wanted.
JP, there's nothing scheduled for tomorrow. Why don't we have solar storage day tomorrow at 10 a.m.? So I'll address the next steps first. From a private sector standpoint, excuse me, we'd love to connect with you if you represent a government agency. We'd love to make that connection so we can get you up to speed with our education, our collateral, just details on the programming, because you probably have a good relationship with your private sector institutions, and being able to facilitate that through you is always going to be beneficial. So that's really the first step. If this is your first time hearing about our program and private sector aggregation, reach out to me or anyone on the Smart Columbus team, and we'll have that sort of first consultation and run you through the program and determine where there potentially is good fits with private sector organizations that fit within your municipality. From a storage standpoint, that's going to be more and more a part of the equation moving forward. Battery storage is still expensive. However, in the right application, it actually can improve economics of wind and solar, depending on a lot of electric in the weeds details that we probably don't have time to get into, but I'm sure John Paul and I would be happy to follow up with you on that front. Due to cost savings from a transmission and distribution standpoint, I mentioned earlier, as the pipe fills, effectively as those wires fill up, the price does increase. So that actually increases the value of storing electricity and using it at a different time. So it's certainly going to be a part of the equation moving forward.
Yeah, I think for me, it's sort of the same thing on next steps. Please, if you are a community, a municipality, township in Central Ohio that is interested in aggregation and specifically in clean energy aggregation, please do reach out to us and let us know. We'd love to have a conversation with you. We're here to be a resource. Just like I was saying earlier, we definitely envision wanting to pull everyone together for a conversation about how we can kind of approach this as a region. And that's regardless of where your community may be with aggregation. I understand some communities may have a program already. You may have the authority to have a program, but maybe it's not active, or maybe you need to go through the whole process of going to the ballot and then, getting a program implemented. Either way, we want to talk to you about it.
Thank you both. This has been fantastic. I love everything both of you are doing. It's truly a treat to work with you guys as often as I get the chance. And thank you once again for sharing your stories with everybody who's been on the line. So it sounds like our next step is to think about convening that conversation. And as Kathy and Chad are saying, design a storage week as well. We'll see about that. Tomorrow there is not a Solar Week session. I apologize. I do have emails that I need to get caught up on. But I just want to express my sincere gratitude to not only all of our speakers this week, but also everyone who has attended. I mean, if MORPC does one thing well, it's convening. And this is just another great example of that. For everybody on the line, I hope you have learned a lot. I hope you have more questions. And when you do, please feel free to reach out to all of us. Any of the speakers, myself, anyone else at MORPC, we are more than happy to help facilitate solutions as possible, education as needed, and anything else that we can help you with. So thank you again, everybody. Looks like we're getting out of here just on time. We'll see ya.